I remember a day a little over 10 years ago. It was the day we brought our first son home from the hospital. And I remember thinking in the moment, like, they're helping you get everything ready to go. You're about to leave. The nurses are helping make sure you have everything that you need going forward. Like, hey, you're going to be taking care of all this stuff. This is what you need to do. Making sure you sign all the paperwork to leave. Making sure you know how to put your kid in a car seat and things like that. And I remember thinking, just in my head, I didn't say it out loud. And my wife was not thinking this. She was ready to go. She was a rock star. She knew it from the minute we started, like, thinking about having a kid. She was ready. But I'm thinking, you're letting us leave the hospital with this child. We have no idea what we're doing. Like, thankfully she did, but I'm thinking, like, I have no clue what I'm doing here. I'm responsible for a human life. I showed up with no responsibilities pretty much, and now there's a human being dependent on us for their well-being. And you know you want to do the right things. You know you want to take care of them, but you don't have all the answers. You don't know what you're going to need to do down the road. And you want to get it right. You want them to, like, succeed in life. You want them to get to a point to where they are a, like, adult that is living a great life. But in that moment, I'm thinking, like, I have no clue what I'm doing. I don't have a clue. And it leads to a simple question I think every parent has of what is best for my kids. Now, I started thinking about it the day we left the hospital. My wife, well before that. Other people, well before that. But you think about it even past when your kids are raised. That question is on your mind, and everything that you're doing, what is the best thing for my kid in this moment? What do they need from me in this? But that simple question leads to an even greater question of what is the end goal of their life? Because the best thing I can do for them will be determined by what the end goal of their life is. For some, it's, hey, I want my kids to have a good, like, career. I want them to be just like successful in business. I want them to be married. I want them to have kids of their own. I want them just to be happy. I want them to enjoy life. There's all sorts of things that people want for their kids, but as people who know and love God, we don't get to choose that. You and I don't get to choose what the end goal of our child's life is. Our kids don't get to choose what the end goal of their life is. That is chosen by the God who made us. And we have to look at his word to see what he says that should be. Psalm 139:14 says, I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. So you, me, our kids, every person that's ever been born is fearfully and wonderfully made. We see in Genesis that we are made in the image of God. So our kids are fearfully and wonderfully made in the image of God. Colossians 1:16 says this, it says, for by him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him. So it's painting this picture of, hey, fearfully and wonderfully made in the image of God, by him and for him. And then Isaiah 43:7 ties it all together. It says, everyone who is called by my name, whom I created for my glory, whom I formed and made. Fearfully and wonderfully made in the image of God, by him and for his glory. That is the end goal of my life and your life and our kids' lives. And everything we do, what is best for my kids has to be leading them in that way. Proverbs 22:6 says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. That wisdom of train up a child in the way he should go, that points us to the way that I'm leading my children should be to glorify God with their lives. And the question then becomes, what do I do? Right? I have this huge, profound thing that God has given me to lead my children in that way, and we don't have the answers. So we're going to look at God's word this morning. But you may be here and you're saying, I'm an empty nester. My kids are grown and gone. I am done with that life. Thank the Lord. Right? You may be here and you're saying, hey, we've been trying to have kids. We can't. You may be here and you're saying, I'm 14. I want lunch. That's it. Okay? Please hang with me, because we're not just talking about parenting. That's the easy thing to think, is we're just talking about just parenting. It's not the stage of life I'm in. I'm just going to check out. What we're talking about here has huge implications for the way I live my life, the way you live your life, and how the bride of Christ lives in this world. And we want to dig in and make sure we get it right. There's too much at stake. So we're in Dueteronomy chapter 6 this morning. If you have a Bible, turn to Dueteronomy chapter 6. Deuteronomy, just in general, is basically God's commands and plans for his people, where he lays out, this is the commands I have for you, this is what I want for you. And we're going to be in Deuteronomy 6, where chapter 5 is where Moses gets the 10 commandments, comes down, gives them to the people. And chapter 6 is the follow-up to that of, you've gotten these commands. Now this is how you live the life I have for you. These commands will help you live what I have for you. So we're going to start in verse 1. Deuteronomy 6, verse 1 says, now this is the commandment, the statutes, and the rules the Lord your God commanded me to teach you, that you may do them in the land to which you are going over to possess it, that you may fear the Lord your God, you and your son and your son's son, by keeping all his statutes and his commandments, which I command you, all the days of your life, and that your days may be long. Hear therefore, O Israel, and be careful to do them, that it may go well with you, and that you may multiply greatly, as the Lord, the God of your fathers, has promised you, in a land flowing with milk and honey. So God has given these commands, and now he's saying, hey, the promised land that I've told you about, that I've had for you, that you're on your way to, I still want that for you, and my commands help you get that. My commands are leading you in that way, training you up in the way that you should go. And I want you to follow me in this. And what he's laying out for us, I want you to live out my plan and purpose for your life. Right? He says that you may possess the land that God has for you, that you may live out the purpose that God has for you. But not just that, that to have a correct and healthy relationship with God, he says that you would fear the Lord, you and your son and your son's sons, that you would train your family to do that well, that you'd have a right relationship with God, and your kids would learn that from you, and your grandkids would learn that. And that if you desire this, what follows is what we need to do. And he lays out what he wants for them, what his desire is for them, how those commands help, and then says, hey, if you want this, verses 4 through 9 is what we need to do. It's what we need to live. Deuteronomy 6, 4 through 9 is known as the Shema prayer in the Jewish faith. It's a building block, a cornerstone of their faith. It's a cornerstone of the faith of followers of Christ as well, because it is a declaration, it's a statement of faith of who God is and our response to him. And it is the exact thing that we need to look at to know what is best for our kids. Deuteronomy 6:4 says, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. This verse is known as the Shema verse, because that first word here is Shema in Hebrew. I don't tell you that because I read it from somewhere else. But Shema here is not just listen and take audio in. It's not like, okay, I have received that. There's a picture of response as well. It's hear and respond. And so what they're laying out for them is knowing God. Is that hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Hear my people, right? God's people hear and listen and then respond. The Lord our God, the Lord is one. Yahweh, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the one true God, creator of the heavens and the earth. He is the only God. He stands alone by himself, needs no one else. Why is it important? Because they just came out of Egypt for hundreds of years, where they lived in the midst of a culture that had a God for everything, that they worshiped false gods all the time. They're wandering in this wilderness, and they're headed on the way to the promised land, and they're surrounded by people that serve false gods. They're headed to a promised land that is surrounded by people who worship false gods, and they need to know where they stand. They'd say this prayer twice a day, morning and night, day after day after day after day, because they needed to have it concrete in who they were, that they knew who God was. Step one for you and I, what is the best thing I can do for my kids? To know and love God for myself with all of myself. That's the first thing I have to do. Right? Verse 4, know God. But then verse 5 says, you shall love the Lord your God. So that response is, okay, I know who God is, and my response to him is that I love him. Now we think love, we think Cupid, chocolates, Valentine's Day, romance. That word love here does not mean romantic love. This word for love here means commitment, covenant, completely loyal, bonded to. It's a picture of a relationship of trust and commitment to. So it's, God, I know you. I know who you are. You are the God of the universe, the one and only God. And my response is to be committed to you, in relationship with you, loyal to you. And we can say, okay, that sounds great. Yeah, I'm here. It's 11 o'clock, right? I'm at church, got my Bible open. God, I'm just committed to you here. When I have my quiet time, I'm committed to you, to focusing on you, to pay attention to what you want to do. When I'm with my Jesus friends doing just Jesus things, I'm just committed to you. When I'm at work, I'm committed to work. When I'm at home, I'm committed to my family. When I'm with my friends, I'm committed to that. No. Could we carry on in verse 5? You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. It's a whole person commitment to God. Not just this and that, I pick and choose, but a whole person commitment to God. And I'm loving him, right? If I love God with all myself, Jesus says in John 14:15, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. Love, in the sense that we're looking at here, is that I am committed to him through trust and obedience. I am committed with all of myself in trust and obedience to God. And we see the Old Testament. We see this great commandment that Dueteronomy 6 is known as the Great Commandment. And we see this, and I think we have a tendency to say, oh, that's old, right? So old means the newer is better. But we're going to see here in a second that Jesus is making some profound statements here. Because what we see here is Dueteronomy 6, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might, with all of yourself. He's saying, this is what's true for my people here. But you may have heard this phrase before, and you thought, I don't read Deuteronomy. I've heard that somewhere else. Jesus, multiple times in the New Testament, is quoting this. And it's in response to being questioned by the religious leaders of that day who are trying to trap him, trying to trick him, trying to get him to say that, hey, this is the wrong thing. Something's more important here, and trip him up to where he violates God's role. And Jesus' response, we see in one spot, Matthew 22:37 and 38. He says, and he said to him, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. So Jesus, who is fully God, is saying, what I said back in Dueteronomy 6 is still true. It's still just as true for God's people as they came out of Egypt as it is for people in the days of Jesus, and it's still true for those of us in 2023. That the most important thing you and I can do is to know and love God with all of ourselves. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and might. And what we see there is that Jesus himself said, hey, I have not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it, to complete it, to perfect it. And so he's saying, hey, what I wrote before, what I said before, still true, and I'm expanding. Let's perfect that in Jesus and what he will do on the cross. So we have to understand, if this is true, if this is the building block of what we need to be as followers of Christ, we need to understand what that means. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and all your might. Now, heart, we think the seat of emotions, right? When you say something to somebody, you say, man, that touched my heart, right? That had an emotional effect on me. It's the seat of the emotions. But for them, it wasn't. Heart was the seat of intellect, knowledge, and understanding. So it's, I love the Lord my God with all my heart, with all my knowledge, understanding, my intellect, what I know. We don't check our brains at the door as followers of Christ, right? We are like committing our intellect and understanding to the God that we know and love. But it's not just that, right? It's not just my heart, it's my soul. Well, what's my soul? It's the core of who I really am, right? I am a soul with a body. You are a soul with a body, not a body with a soul. It's the person of who you really are. It's your will. It's the choices and the decisions that you make. So I'm loving God with all of myself, including in my will, the core of who I am and my choices and decisions that I make. And then there's my might, right? It's my physical self. It's with all of my effort, my energy, and my actions. And the picture painted here is with what I know and understand, with what I will and choose to do, and then what I act on. I am loving God in every aspect of that. My whole life completely given over to Christ. What's the best thing I can do for my kids? Know and love God for myself with all of myself. Verse 6 carries on. And these words that I command you shall today be on your heart. These words should be on your heart. Again, heart is not like emotions. It is what you know and understand. It's a picture of just inscribe them as if in stone on your heart. They are etched into who you are. Why? Because you're going to live in a world that opposes this. You're going to live in a world that tells you to believe everything other than this. You're going to live in a world that will try to convince you that there are many gods, not one God, and you need to know and understand this. There should be no doubt in your life. You have committed this. That's why they said it morning and evening, day after day after day after day. They know who God is, and the response to him is to love him in every aspect of who they are. For us to understand that, right, with what Jesus has laid out is that, hey, we need to know and understand, and with our will and choices and how we act, the way we live our whole life, be committed to God because we know what the gospel says, that we were sinners separated from God, born apart from him. Nothing we could do about it, nothing we could do to fix it, but he said, I love you still. And I want to make a way where there was no way. I will send my son to die for you, to pay the sin debt that you can't pay, and he will die on the cross, not because he owes it to you, not because I have to, but because I love you and I want to. And he'll pay for the sins of you, me, and the sins of the world. He'll rise from the dead. He's defeated sin and death, and you and I have the choice to follow him, to love him with our whole life or not. We have to do that. That's the first thing we have to do, is know and love God for ourselves with all of ourselves. What does that look like? Why is that the best thing for my kids? If you've ever been on an airplane, you have not listened to the first part where they go through the seat back pocket card in front of you. And they tell you there's exits in the front and over the wings. And they tell you, hey, if the plane goes down in water, use your seat as a flotation device. And then this will drop from the ceiling, and they'll say, or they'll pretend it will, and they'll say, hey, if the cabin loses pressure, an oxygen mask will drop from the ceiling, and you will pull down on that to start the flow of oxygen, put it on, and though the bag does not inflate, oxygen will still be flowing to the mask. Hopefully you've never had to use it, but you've probably heard it. And then they say something that just as a parent doesn't make a lot of sense to me. You kind of fight against it a little bit. They say if you're traveling with a child or someone that needs help, first put on your mask before helping them with theirs. And the parent in you is like, no, I will die for my children, right? I will put this mask on them as this plane is hurtling 500 miles an hour through 30,000 feet in the air. This mask will save my child in the moment. But what the people and the experts that wrote these procedures knew and understood was that for you to best be capable to help your child, to give them what they need, you have to be connected to it first. That you have to have the oxygen mask on you before you can help your kid, because you will pass out and not be able to help your kid. And as backward as it may seem to you, the best thing you could do for them is for you to put it on first and then help them. Well, what American Airlines has figured out in the last 50 years, Jesus and the gospel and God's word knew well before that. But the best thing for you and your kids is not for you to make sure your kids go to church, not to make sure that your kids have a Bible, it's all that good stuff, but the best thing you can do first and foremost is for you to be connected to the source of life, the creator of the universe, the maker who knows you and created you fearfully and wonderfully in his image for his glory. You need to be connected to him first before you can help your kids. That has to happen. That has to be the first step, but we can't just know it. Right, if I'm on an airplane and this drops down, I can say, I know what I need to do. I hear the oxygen rushing out of this plane right now. I need to put this on. If I put that on, that will give me oxygen. I will be able to breathe. I will live and survive. And I can look at it and say, yes, I know that, but it doesn't do anything if I don't do anything with it. I have to choose in my will. Say, I need that. I will do that. And then with my actions, put it on. A whole person commitment and trust and obedience to our God. Do you know and love God? You have to start there. First and foremost, if you want to do what's best for your kids, you have to know and love God for yourself. But not with little bits of you, with your whole self. What are you holding back? What area of your life is off limits to God? You say, I have this. I am committed to other things than that. The thing is, we can't pass on what we don't know. And that we know it and we have it for ourselves, but that's just step one. Step two is that we intentionally teach and model what it looks like to know and love God. Verse 7 lays it out. You shall teach them diligently to your children. You shall teach them. Right? It's an imperative. It's not you might if you have time. You can if you want to, if it seems important. Like you probably should. No, it's you shall. You must. We are stewards of the faith. We're stewards of the gospel as followers of Christ. And we have a responsibility to pass that along to our children. Paul in 2 Corinthians 5:20 calls us like ambassadors. He says, therefore, we are ambassadors for Christ, God making his appeal through us. We implore you on behalf of Christ, be reconciled to God. As people that know and love, have a relationship and are just loyal and committed to and in covenant with God with all of our lives, we are ambassadors. We represent him. And God is making his appeal through us, and we implore our kids, right, on behalf of Christ, to be reconciled to God, to know and love him as well. And if the gospel has changed my whole life, every aspect of my life is going to bleed that out, and it will teach that. That's why it's so important that I be connected to him first, that I know and love him for myself, because I can't know and love and pass on that stuff that I don't know and love myself. If I don't know and love him, I can't pass it on to my kids. I don't know how to teach them that. I have to know and love him first to pass that on. We're to teach the commands of God with urgency and intentionality. You shall teach them diligently to your children and shall talk of them. Teach of them and talk of them. Two different things, but we're told to do both. We can talk of them, and our kids know the things of God, and they hear the things of God, but we need to teach it with our lives as well. But we can't just teach with our lives and hope that they catch it and never talk to them about it. We have to do both. We have to teach and talk to them about the things of God. And he lays out, says, you shall talk of them when you sit in your house and when you walk by the way and when you lie down and when you rise. It's a picture of a whole life that is just given over and committed and intentional about modeling and teaching what it looks like to know and love God. When you sit in your house, right? It's when you're doing the everyday things of life, laundry, making dinner, washing the car, raking leaves, planning out the meal plan for the next week, right? Family game night, laundry again, right? Whatever things you're doing at home, everything that you do at home, just the normal everyday life, we are teaching and talking about the things of God with our kids. But not just at home. It's not just, hey, our faith stays at home, and when we go out, we do other things. He says, and when you walk along the way. We have cars. We drive to Schnucks and get our groceries and drive back 30 minutes and we're done. They didn't have cars. They walked, not to Schnucks, but to the market, right? And they would have hours where they're doing this. And it would say, be intentional about the time. When you're at home, yeah, it's easy, right? We're all here. Let's focus on this. But when you're going about the normal things of life, when you're headed to practice, when you're running errands, when you're just going to pick up the dry cleaning or whatever, right? Whatever things you're doing in life, in those moments, too, teach and talk of the things of God to your children. Intentionally teach and model them in every part of our life. And just in case we didn't get it, he goes into, and from when you lay down to when, and then when you rise up. So I'm teaching and talking the things of God to my kids and helping them to grasp and understand what it looks like to know and follow him, modeling that for them in the normal things of life at home. When I'm out on the road, we get home, we're tired, we're about to go to bed. I'm still doing that to the moment I lay my head down on the pillow, and then I wake up again in the morning, my eyes pop open, my head comes off the pillow, and I start again. My life, the purpose of my life is to glorify God. And as a parent, you do that through intentionally teaching and modeling what it looks like to know and love God for your kids after you know and love him for yourself with all of yourself. What does that look like? If you want to teach your kid to hunt, your son or daughter, you want to teach them to hunt, you don't take them to hunting class on Sunday morning for an hour and a half, drop them off, and then you pick them up, and they get in the car, you ask them how it went. If they're a little kid, they explain for about 40 minutes. If they're an older kid, they say, I don't know, it's all right. And then you go home and you bring them back the next week, drop them off at class again. No. You know and love hunting. That's why you're trying to teach your son or daughter hunting. What you know and love comes out in every part of your life. So when you're teaching your kid to hunt, when you're driving on Lee May Ferry and you're seeing a bunch of deer come out, you're noticing that the rut is about to start and you're getting excited about it. When you're walking through the woods, you're seeing just a deer trail, and you're looking at trees around, what's a good place to put a tree stand? When you're taking your son or daughter, you're taking them to go to the archery range to go learn how to shoot a bow and how to stand right and what a good drawback looks like and how to breathe and aim and stay calm and how to do it, and you're practicing it over and over and over again. But even before that, you are with them and you are teaching them what it means to go out and hunt, why you're doing it, and you're teaching them what you need to have and what you need to do to prepare. And then there's an age where they come where you take them with you as you go hunt and you show them what to do. You show them how you go out in the woods. You show them how you get up in the tree stand. You show them how to sit and you show them what to look for and you show them all these things. And then there's a point to where they're going to hunt themselves and you're going with them and you're helping them and you're doing that. And it's bleeding out into every aspect of your life because you know and love it. You can't help it. You're at just dinner today eating some chili and you're thinking this would be better if it was venison, right? You're it's just every aspect of your life, it's pouring out. You don't have to concentrate on it. And we do it with things like hunting, we do it with sports, we do it with our hobbies, we do it with our just like political views, we do it with all sorts of stuff. But for some reason, we really struggle to do it with the one thing God told us to do it with. That we are to intentionally teach and model what it looks like to know and love God, and it is to bleed out into every part of our life to where our kids can't help but notice it. We want to take advantage of every moment to point to the things of God. Teachable moments are all around us, and we have to look for them and take advantage of them. One of the things I love about my wife, there's many things, but she's fantastic in so many ways, but she's really, really good about finding those moments with our boys. We had a moment, it was a year or two ago, I don't even know exactly when, but we were driving on Lions Den Road. The sun was going down in the summer, beautiful sunset, and she pointed out, just said, hey boys, look at that sunset that God created. What does that teach us about him? I'm sitting there thinking like, I am the pastor. I should be the one that's saying these things, right? But our boys said something like, oh, it shows God's creative and he's just like powerful. It's looking for those moments, right? And before you think like, oh, you're the pastor, like of course your family does that. We don't sit around and talk about transubstantiationism for 2 hours a night after dinner and read Greek, okay? We don't. In fact, probably about 30 seconds after the conversation about the sunset, someone burped or passed gas, the boys just like giggled and then we were gone, but like moment over. You look for those intentional moments because why? I want everything my kids see to point to Christ. And I want them to see it in every little thing. There's a tendency and there's something within us that says, man, I want to just like protect my kids. I want to keep them because I see how dark and bad this world can be. And I want to make sure that they're shielded and hidden from it. And that doesn't come from a bad place. But we have to know and understand that there will be a point to where we are not here to protect our kids from that world and they will have to face it. And more than protecting my kids, I need to prepare them. I need to just prepare them to know what someone who knows and loves God, how do they act as someone who, with every part of their being, how do they display the glory of God in this situation? When they confront someone who hates them and doesn't like them because of what they view, how does someone who knows and loves God deal with that? And I need to be able to teach them and model that for them. How in the world does someone who knows and loves God react to a political climate that is so charged? They need to see that, not just hear about it. They need to see it in my life. How does someone who know and love God, what does they do in a culture that is sexually just like perverse and just like deviant? In an age-appropriate way, they need to see how someone should handle that. If we don't prepare them for it, they are going to get slapped in the face with it when they're on their own. We have to help them. We have to teach and model for them. But the message we want to send to our kids is say, view everything through the lens of the gospel in every aspect of your life, media, culture, right? Relationships, everything should be viewed through, I am to know and love God with every aspect of my life. So how is that lived out in this area, in my job, in my friendships, in my relationships, every area of my life? The message we want to send to them is the message of Paul in 1 Corinthians 11:1, where he says, be imitators of me as I am of Christ. We want to be able to tell our kids, hey, you can follow me because I'm following Christ. I am clinging as close as I possibly can to him, so it's safe to follow me because I'm leading you to him. Why is that such a big deal? Because their end goal is to glorify him. My end goal is to glorify him. I have to teach and show them what it looks like to do that. And I can't live a do as I say and not as I do life and wonder why my kids aren't bought in. Know and love God yourself with all of yourself. Intentionally teach and model what it looks like to know and love God. And that leads to step 3, that the world is changed by people and families that are marked with the gospel. Verses 8 and 9. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Like the Hebrew people would literally take a string in a little box and tie it on their forehead and put that scripture inside. So it was right there, center, right between the eyes. They do the same for their arms, wrists. As a reminder to themselves that what I set my eyes on, what I'm thinking about, what I'm looking at, what I'm choosing to do, what I know and understand, and my actions of my life, I will view them through this passage of Scripture, through God's Word. Every action of my life, we don't wear those things, but we still want the same to be true. That everything I put in front of my eyes, everything I think about, everything I know and understand, everything I choose in my will, and every action I take, I need to do it through the lens of the gospel. Is is what I'm doing, knowing and loving God in every aspect of my life. When that happens, people will notice. Your kids will notice. Your coworkers will notice. Your friends will notice. The rest of your family will notice. We are people that should be marked by the gospel and what it has done in our life. Here's the thing, is your life will preach the gospel of whatever is most important to you. And we got to be careful because it doesn't always end up being this book. The most important thing to you, you will teach to your children. Our lives should be marked as people who, first and foremost, above all, we are about the gospel and following and loving and knowing God with all of ourselves. Acts 4:13 is the prayer that I hope for me and my family. I hope for you and your kids. That when my kids watch me and my wife, when your kids watch you, I pray that these words would be true. Acts 4, that the early church has been born, persecution has come, and these words we see. Now, when they saw the boldness of Peter and John and perceived that they were uneducated, common men, they were astonished. There's so much comfort in that. You know how many times I screw up? I have to apologize to my kids. It's probably more than you think. It's probably more than I apologize for. They noticed they were uneducated, common men. They noticed that these guys, who we see as pillars of the faith, were normal people. Nothing special about them. I take comfort in that. I'm a normal person. I'm not a super saint, and neither are you. But the next part of the verse is what I pray my kids will notice. And they recognize that they had been with Jesus. That I pray that when my kids look at my life, it's not perfect, it's not like something to write home about, but they cannot just deny that I have been with Jesus. They will say, wow, I look at mom and dad's life, and I know they've been with Jesus. And I know they're following him. I know that all their life is given over to him, and they may fail, trip up, and not do the right thing every time. But there's no doubt in my mind that they have been with Jesus. But the question would be, if my kids hear more about my fantasy football team, my political views, work, my just relationships with others, if they hear more about those things, if they hear me talk about those more than I am talking about the gospel and living that out, if they see me watching Fox News more than I read my Bible, what am I preaching to them? What am I teaching them as the gospel of my life? My whole life teaches, your whole life teaches, we have to make sure we're teaching the right thing. There's only one end goal for their lives given to them by their Creator, and it is to glorify Him. We have a responsibility with that. I ask you to hang with me if you weren't in this stage of life, because it has gospel implications for us. See, we see the relationship in a marriage is a picture of the gospel to us, that Jesus, the bridegroom, sacrificially, lovingly gave himself up for his bride, the church. And that every marriage should point us and remind us of the gospel and the relationship that we have with God. And in Dueteronomy 6 is a picture of the family, which is also a picture of the gospel. It's a father who loves unconditionally the son and wants to bring him back. But it's also a picture of multiplication and discipleship. Look at what we've talked about already. One person committed to God in every part of their life, living their life to fully glorify God in everything that they do, all the while walking with another to intentionally teach and model to them what it is to know and love God so that they can one day pass it along to someone else. That's how the church grows. Discipleship. And so while we're talking about in Dueteronomy 6, yes, like the family, this is how faith is passed along from generation to generation. This is what we need to do to help our kids live a life that will glorify God. Jesus, again, he did not come to abolish the law, but to complete it, fulfill it, perfect it. And he's saying it's still true. It's so true, but let's think bigger. And Jesus is saying, hey, not just the family. The family that I am thinking about, the family that is on his mind is his bride, the church, the family of God. We need to live our lives out with that in mind as well. Jesus takes it bigger. We go from the great commandment in Dueteronomy 6 to the great commission in Matthew 28, 19, and 20. In Dueteronomy 6, we have, "Hear, O Israel." In Matthew 28, we have, "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations." He's saying it is good and true, but let's make it bigger. Let's invite others in. Let's invite the world. He does not wish that anyone should perish, but all that all should come to repentance. Matthew 12:49 and 50. He says the same thing, but the great commission, go therefore make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. That's straight out of Dueteronomy 6. And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age. He wants to make his family bigger. He wants more people to be a part of it. Why? Because that's how we glorify him. That's how our life, the end goal of our life, glorifies him by more people coming to know him. Matthew 12:49 and 50 says, and stretching out his hand toward his disciples, he said, here are my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother. Romans 8:15, for you did not receive the spirit of slavery to fall back into fear, but you have received the spirit of adoption as sons, by whom we cry, Abba, Father. He's saying those on the outside, I want to bring in. I want my family to be bigger. Galatians 4:7, so you are no longer a slave, but a son, and if a son, then an heir through God. Those on the outside brought in, and they get all the rights and privileges of someone who is a son or daughter of the king. He wants his family to be bigger. 1 Timothy 5:1 and 2, do not rebuke an older man, but encourage him as you would a father, younger men as brothers, older women as mothers, younger women as sisters, in all purity. Followers of Christ, whether we have kids or not, we are called to the exact same thing as was laid out in Dueteronomy 6. For the glory of God and the sake of his church and the spread of the gospel, right? We are to first and foremost know and love God for ourselves with all of ourselves. And then to intentionally teach and model what it looks like to know and love God. Whether that's in a 3-year-old class across the hall in First Kids Junior, whether you're teaching 4th grade up in First Kids, whether you're leading a small group, or if you just met a 70-year-old guy who just gave his life to Christ, you're going to walk with him and disciple him. We are to intentionally teach him how what it looks like to know and love God. The example is Paul and Timothy. Paul was not his biological dad. He had no reason to go in and say, I must do this. He said, there's a young man who needs to know what it looks like to know and love God, and I will do it. Why? Because I already know and love God myself. We are called to as this church. It's not about kids. It's bigger than that. So the question would be, do you know and love God? You got to give your life to him, all of it, holding nothing back. And accept the gospel that he has so richly lavished upon us. Are you walking with others so that you will follow him well and you'll give all of your life over to him? Or is there someone in your life that is able to say to you, hey, you're holding back. You haven't given everything over. Do it. Walk with me. We're going to do this together. You need to be involved in discipleship. Get in a small group. Go right outside these doors right after this. Make a left. The growth center is right there. Mark Stockton with a nice goatee is there. He would love to talk with you about getting involved in a small group. You tell him, I need to be involved in this because there's too much at stake for my kids and for the church. That I need to know and love God for myself and have people alongside me pushing me there too. Make a problem for Mark. Have so many people show up there that want to get involved in a small group that Mark is having to find places to put you that we don't even know existed in this building. We have to be serious about it. Are you modeling for the next generation what it looks like to know and love God? There's a place for you to serve. But we don't need childcare. We don't need people to babysit so their parents can go to service or can go to their class. We need people who know and love God with all of themselves, who want to intentionally teach and model what it looks like to know and love God. And will say to young people, follow me as I follow Christ. There's a spot for you. Will you be diligent and see the urgency in it to help with that? Lastly, as we wrap up, parents, live your life in a way to point your children to the God that you already know and love. For me, the best day to start with that was well over 10 years ago. You may have kids that are, 13. I haven't done that. 13 years ago was the best time to start, but the second best day is right now. You can't change the past, but you can change what you do from here on out. And your kids will notice a change in you. And they will see if you are living out what it looks like to know and love God, they will notice that. Church, whether you have kids or not, live your life in a way that if God calls me or my wife home, before my kids are raised,
or calls one of these parents home before their kids are raised, that my kids won't have far to look for someone that's saying, follow me as I follow Christ. There's too much at stake. Just because you don't have kids doesn't mean you don't have a responsibility to the bride of Christ to say, I will be an example. And I will glorify God with my life. I will know and love God with all of myself, and intentionally teach and model what it looks like to know and love him. The question is, will we do anything about it? Let's pray.